I'm Derek Irene. I've been in the real estate business for over 3 decades. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm always paying attention to real estate trends, industry innovators, and business influencers.
I'm Alan Smith. For over 25 years, I've helped buyers and sellers with their real estate needs. Join us on this podcast. Let's talk about strategies to help you play this real estate game to win.
Join us as we search out the latest trends, hot topics, red flags, and deal breakers in every episode of Market Movers.
We're rolling. That's
Al,
awesome.
I'm gonna throw you off a little bit.
Okay.
Tell me my favorite story of yours.
What is my favorite story? Well, your favorite story of mine.
It's early. Well, first of all, it's a beautiful spring day here
It
at
is.
General Scott, Tacoma North.
It is.
And
There's many stories I can't share
yeah.
on this podcast.
Okay. Well, I like the motorcycle
Oh,
roadhouse bar story.
So yeah, when I bought back in the day, I bought a motorcycle and I went to pick it up, and the salesperson looks at me, and there I am in all my spiffy new leathers. By the way, it never dawned on me that I would spend $2,000 in leathers and helmets and boots and stuff before I went to pick up the motorcycle, but I did. And so I went to pick up the motorcycle, and he says, so this was a 1985 Kawasaki 900 Ninja. It's the same motorcycle that's in the first Top Gun movie and in Top Gun Maverick. And I bought it 2 months before that movie came out, not even knowing anything, but I just...
A young Alan.
I know.
In your leathers.
Yes. It was 1986, even though it was a 1985 model. And I went to pick it up, and the salesman looks at me, and he had this funny look on his face because he knew. And he says,
Of course he did.
Have you ridden before? And I said, oh, yeah, because I had ridden my uncle's Honda 90 around the barn like 20 years earlier. So, of course, I had ridden before. And he says, well, you do realize that this is the fastest production motorcycle in the world. It goes from 0 to 60 in 2.2. And the tires are brand new, so they're slippery. So put at least 100 miles on this before you romp on the throttle. And I said, okay. And so he says, all right, enjoy your bike. And I took off and I cracked the throttle. And within 1.5 seconds, I was laying down in the middle of the parking lot because the bike was so snappy. And
Yeah.
so he helped me pick up the bike. And then I think it was all of maybe 3.5 minutes later, I'm standing in line at the parts counter ordering new turn signals because all the turn signals and the shift lever had snapped off when I laid it down. The bike was all scratched up. There's a big hole in the front fairing. So that's how I started my modern motorcycle career.
Nice.
So, yeah, it was a great moment.
So, kids, be careful on the motorcycles.
Kids, be careful. Be careful. Even the slowest motorcycles in the world,
Absolutely.
you can lay them down.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It doesn't take much.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to talk a little bit on topics that are related to real estate brokers and to our buyers and sellers.
Okay.
So help me set this up. What are we going to cover today?
So I think it's important when you're, and we have when you're working with sellers, that side of the coin, and then the other side of the coin is when you're working with buyers. But I think it's really important that we understand what the motivations are of our clients, what they're trying to get accomplished. Because after all, if they could do it on their own, why would they hire us, right? They're hiring us to help them provide a solution for something in their life.
Right.
They've got to get moved. And so there are things that we need to know about our clients because every client's different. And we want to make sure that we're in tune with what's important to them and that we're helping them accomplish their goals. So I think there's a series of questions that are good to ask. So we have a better, if you will, roadmap on how to help them get to wherever the next chapter of their life is.
Right,
And
absolutely.
it's really dialing in on what their needs are so that we can help them.
Yeah, so from the agent perspective, that first meeting with a seller, there's some important things that we need to talk about in conversation, not only talking about what their property is worth and that sort of thing, but just generally like speaking to motivation, the process, those types of things. So let's cover some of those. But the first thing that we have to remember as agents is show up on time. Right?
So I grew up in the military world, in the Marine Corps. I was a Marine Corps brat. And it was instilled in me very early in life that if you show up late,
It's over.
that's the worst thing you can possibly do. And to this day, if I think I'm going to be late, it just drives me crazy. And um, so understand that you have a lot of clients out there that are the same way. And if you show up habitually late for appointments, it's disrespectful to the people that you're meeting with, number one, because your time is somehow more valuable than theirs. That's how they're seeing that. But it sets the wrong tone. You don't Why start off on that foot? So if anything, get there 15 minutes early and drive around the neighborhood and just check things out until the appropriate time. You're never going to be harmed by that strategy, right?
Absolutely,
So show up
absolutely.
on time, show up prepared, show up with if you're showing up with on a listing appointment, especially how do sellers judge us? Well, they judge us on how we look, how we sound, how we come across. So look professional. Show up with all your marketing materials dialed in because
Right.
they're hiring you to market their home. And so, how are they going to know if they're picking the right person? Well, they're going to look at your marketing materials because that's a reflection of you. That's how you're marketing yourself. So, a seller says, well, they're never going to be better at marketing than marketing themselves. If you have ratty old
Right.
papers with coffee rings on them and stuff, and they're dog eared and they're wrinkled, and you're haphazard and pulling them out of your backpack or whatever, that says a lot
It says a whole lot.
without
And
saying one word.
absolutely. And I think that within 60 seconds, if I were to be honest, I've already decided whether I'm going to work with somebody or not.
Yeah.
And I've been using the term, you know one when you see one a lot lately because I want our brokers to be that person where they're immediately identified as a professional. This is somebody who really works on their business, instant recognition that this is a pro,
Right.
right? That's what we're going for.
Exactly. And you have to earn that position.
Yeah.
It's the old retail analogy is how many times have you walked in a store and somebody that's engaging walks up and say, "Hey, thanks for coming in. How can I help?" And the first thing we say is just looking,
Yeah.
even though we know we're there to buy a toaster.
And they're doing what they're supposed
And they're
to do,
doing what they're
we
supposed to be
want
doing,
them
but
to
we
do.
have to earn that, right?
Yeah.
We have to earn that. So you show up on time or early. You're never late. You're never disorganized. You're never talking about all the bad things that happened to you that day because it's not your time to vent. It's your time to get engaged and see how you can help these people.
Yeah, and the flip side of your example, and I always rant about this, is when you go to Home Depot and you're walking down the aisles and 5 people ask you if they can help you.
Yeah.
The one time you take them up on it, they
can't-
usually don't.
They can't help you.
They can't help you.
Oh, I don't know where those are.
Yeah. So if somebody takes you up on it,
Yeah.
you know them when you see them.
Where are the light bulbs?
You got to be ready.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what we're getting at. We're going to help you get ready so that you can do a better job on the agent side. And then we're going to talk about on the seller side what you should be looking for.
Perfect.
And
Yeah.
things to ask and things to look out for.
Well,
right?
so kind of an obvious thing, starting off, if we just hop on the seller side of the
Yeah.
coin here, one of the first questions that you want to try to figure out is why are they selling?
Yeah. What's your motivation? Right. We want to know that. If it's not that important, then that's okay.
Right.
We're not here for instant gratification. We want to help you do whatever it is you want to do, but let us know what your motivation.
So
we need to
yeah,
find
why
that
are
out.
you selling? And by the way, sometimes it's not a good reason. Sometimes it can be a happy occasion as to why they're selling. Take a job transfer, for example. Somebody got promoted. Somebody got promoted, and there's a job transfer, and everybody's excited. Okay, well, that same exact situation, somebody could not be excited about because now we have to move. Now we have to pull our kids out of the school they love. Now they have to go meet new friends. And so there can be positives and negatives about every move. So we have to be sensitive to that. Don't just assume, oh, you're getting divorced. Awesome. Don't assume
Yeah,
that.
you have to be real careful.
Right,
Right.
right.
Because they're and a lot of times we don't really know folks right away. When we're going to an appointment, it might be by referral, but we don't really know them. And so we just need to kind of work with them to get that motivation.
Yeah, and by the way,
build some trust.
the things that I kind of think about when I'm talking with sellers, these aren't in any particular order. That might be the wrong question to ask right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Maybe you spend some time with them and you're more comfortable in conversation and stuff. But so a lot of times, in addition to that, we might be asking, what's your timeline looking like?
Yeah.
How soon do you want to make this happen? Do you have to be somewhere else by a certain deadline, or are you a little more flexible in that? Sometimes those questions are easier to get
Yeah.
into. So this is no particular order, but it's things we're definitely going to want to know eventually.
Yeah,
so we can
absolutely.
help them the best.
Yeah, and everyone's different. I try really hard to not engage in a real estate conversation right away. And I learned that the hard way when I was a brand new broker. I had the skill set down for my listing presentation because I went to the Pro Start course and I practiced
Right.
on my kitchen table.
Yeah.
And so I would, my first 4 or 5 listing appointments, I would get in and introduce myself and then ready, set, go. Here I go
Here I go.
on my presentation. I
Right.
would not spend any time. Of course, I was young and didn't know anything. I wouldn't spend any time really just getting to know those folks, right?
So what changed? What changed for you?
Okay, so one day I forgot to bring all my stuff.
Oh,
I thought it was in my car.
yeah.
I show up at the house, and I look in the back seat. It's not that my listing presentation materials aren't there.
Oh boy.
So I walk in and apologetic, I start talking first, and then I'm kind of stalling out, telling them I'm not prepared for my
Right.
own appointment here, and so I just got in conversation naturally, stalling them out to tell them the bad news that I'm not going to be able to sit down and go over all the numbers, right?
Right.
So that went on for about 20, 30 minutes.
Just
and
talking.
Just
with them.
talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then by the time I had to spring it on them and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't bring my stuff," they were like, "You got the listing. Just bring it back." And the light bulb finally went off. Oh,
Wow.
wait, I need to spend some time up front, really just getting to know
Yes.
folks.
That's important. So that's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
And those are life lessons. We
been
learn
with
them
me.
the hard way.
Been with me
Yeah.
ever since.
We learn where the curbs are when we stub our toe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's when we remember, okay, don't do that again. So,
Yeah. So just, don't talk real estate. Just get to know your folks first. And then there's some important things that we need to discover. Right?
So another thing that we eventually want to find out when we're talking with sellers is what kind of mortgage balance do they have? Because we want to prepare a net proceeds sheet for them to say, okay, if we sell your home in this timeline for this much and take all the other things into account, any expenses and things, compensation for real estate and all this kind of stuff, here's about what you're going to net.
Right.
A lot of sellers are focused on that more than the selling price, which they probably should be because it's ultimately what you put in your pocket. But we want to find that out. And so, that can be a delicate question depending on your relationship with these folks. So to your point, if you spent time getting to know them, they won't hesitate. If you say, about how much do you owe on the property? They won't hesitate to say, oh, it's about 500.
Yeah.
But if you come right out of the gate with that,
Right.
it's like, whoa.
How much you owe on your house?
Yeah, how much you owe on your house?
Hi, I'm
Yeah,
Alan.
yeah,
How much
yeah.
you owe on your house?
Yeah, that's an ugly dog. You might as well tell them that. So don't do that. But eventually you do want to know that. So I like to use a phrase. I'd say, if you don't mind sharing with me about how much do you owe on
You're asking for
on the
permission.
property? Yeah.
I think
Because-
that's important.
because I want to try to paint a picture for you of about what you can expect for your net proceeds on the place. And so
Right.
it's important to know that eventually. That's good information to have because that's what people should be focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that might be a hard question for some people to ask because we don't generally try to delve into people's financial stuff, but that is an important one.
And I think the more you ask, the more appointments you get. Some of these questions, by the way, is just how many, if I use a baseball analogy, how many at-bats have you had?
Yeah.
How many appointments have you had with sellers? The more appointments you have, the easier it gets for you to ask these questions. The very first time you're going to be nervous about
Yeah.
asking these things. But another another great question is, have there been any recent upgrades or renovations to the place? And talking
Yeah.
about that, and
I love that one because it kind of opens up a lot of conversations, and it also allows for a little walk around. And everyone you can feel everyone kind of relax because, you've kind of built some rapport, and now you're just kind of talking about all the good
yeah,
things they've done to their house.
and most people are really excited and happy about the improvements they've made on the property. And a lot of times, by the way, you're asking these questions while you're walking around
Yeah,
and they're giving you the
doing a walk
tour.
around.
It's just conversation. And and then the flip side of that coin is okay, when you added this glass solarium on the end of the house, did you get it permitted?
Right. It's good to know.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. We can always work around things as it comes up, but you'd be surprised how many people just don't do that. And so,
Yeah, pretty common
You
for
wanna know.
homeowners to kind of do their own stuff, and we just need to know it for disclosure purposes.
sure.
Our job is to guide you so that you down the road you don't get any phone calls after closing saying, "Hey, the county just came out and they
Yeah.
want to know why there's an extra garage."
Or why there's a second floor
Yeah,
on the house.
yeah, we had that happen
Yeah,
once,
I
yeah.
remember that. So,
Yeah.
and then on the other side of that, are there any issues with the property?
Right.
Any-
Again, talking disclosure
Yep,
issues.
disclosure issues, and our position is always disclose.
Yes.
Because eventually you will find a buyer that just doesn't care about this thing. But if you're trying to, it's better to say yes, the roof leaked, and now we put a brand new roof on,
Yeah.
than to say no, the roof doesn't leak.
Right.
Because you're going to find a buyer anyway, and you don't want that phone call, to your point, down the road saying, "Hey, you never told us."
Right.
And by the way, the home inspector is going to see all the stains on the underside of the plywood.
Yeah.
And if you've already disclosed that, yeah, there was a leak and we put a brand new roof on, so the problem's solved, then everybody's happy with that.
That's a great example of why we have these conversations. That example is getting out in front of it. Because, yes, we're not required to advise our clients to disclose a material defect that has been corrected. But if there were obvious signs that there were problems,
Yeah.
then it's better to disclose, hey, we had this problem, we fixed it. Here's the receipt from the roofing company or whatever the case may be. And that way you're out in front of it. Then when it comes up, it's already, oh yeah, I saw that in the disclosure. It's already been dealt with.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing. And then,
Yeah.
of course, another thing that you're going to want to know, and sometimes this comes up on a title report when you're getting ready to list a property, you order a preliminary title. You want to look, are there any liens or judgments or anything like that showing up that are going to affect that net proceeds sheet?
Yeah.
Because when you met with them originally, you said, okay, the net proceeds shows that if you sell it for this, you're going to walk away with this.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you find out there's a $20,000 lien on the property. That affects their net proceeds. And so that's maybe I don't typically ask people that question, but I look for that when I order the title report to make sure that what I'm thinking they're going to net is still in line with the
Right.
reality.
Right.
And things happen in life. It's not a good or bad. It's just you just have
Exactly.
to know so that you're painting an accurate picture.
Yeah, and I think some folks might be embarrassed if there's something on their title, there's a judgment or a lien, but life is life and things happen,
Sure.
like you said. And if we can convey that to our clients that, hey, this is just this is normal.
And
People have things happen.
quite frankly, if certain liens and things against the property, they may have been on there for a long time and they don't really think about
Right.
it. They
Sometimes
don't-
they're dealt with.
and yes, sometimes the liens or judgments have been paid off, but they didn't get recorded correctly.
Yeah, that's
and
an
so they're
issue.
still on title. So that's if you're a real estate broker right now watching this, the most important thing you can do, one of the most important things, is order preliminary title on your listing. Get out in front of these things. So if there is something that shows up and your seller says, wait a minute, we paid that off 10 years ago, then title and escrow can get to work getting that recorded correctly and getting it off title, because they have to clear all that up at closing. So
Yeah.
the buyer doesn't inherit any of that, right? So, so that's another reason why if you're making a checklist of things
Yeah,
to do,
yes.
make sure that's on the checklist.
And this is really common, and your red flag should go up immediately if your seller bought their property originally with an owner contract, a lot of times that reconveyance is never done because the buyers and sellers just didn't know that that's something you have to do. And what that is when you pay off your mortgage, the seller has to send basically documentation to be recorded that says it's all been paid off.
It's all good.
And that part just never seems to get done.
Right.
Because nobody knows.
Well, it's easy to think, forget about.
And the problem can be if it was 20 years ago and that seller is no longer around or had they moved, and then you have to do a quiet title action. That's a 6-month situation. Takes a long time.
Which may prohibit your selling the property.
Yeah, it will.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, heads up with that. That's why we ask these questions.
Well, there's so on the good side of the questions, it's always good to ask them, okay, what do you love most about living here and the neighborhood? Neighborhood property, things that you've done over time. What do you enjoy most about living here? And whatever the seller says better be on your marketing remarks.
That's right.
Because it's important to them and they want to make sure, maybe it's the deck that they built last summer, right? That they just love this deck. They love sitting out in the morning, having a cup of coffee, listening to the birds, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you hate birds and you don't drink coffee and,
What's wrong with you?
I know, right? But that better be in your marketing remarks because it's important to your seller. And maybe that's what resonates with another buyer.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love sitting out in the back deck in the morning in the quiet, listening to the birds and enjoying a morning cup of coffee, right?
Yeah.
That you're selling a lifestyle in addition to just a box on a piece of dirt, right?
Right.
You're selling, do you really want to live here? And so the things that are important to your clients and the things that they've enjoyed the most about living there are probably going to resonate with other buyers too.
Another important thing, we can take this a step farther, is that when we're talking to sellers, let's have them help us write the marketing remarks.
Sure. Yeah.
Bring them in. We're a team together because all those things that are really important to them, they want to see on their marketing remarks. If you forget to put them on there, it's going to reflect poorly on you.
Yeah. And this might go without saying, but when sellers or buyers for that matter are telling you things that are important, you should be writing this down.
Yeah.
You shouldn't just be nodding your head and walking around like you just really don't care.
It's like going to a restaurant and they take your order and there's 10 people at the table.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, are you sure you got that?
Your meal's always screwed up. Yeah,
it's always screwed up.
No, when I walk in when the seller's showing me their place, I have a clipboard and I have the data input sheets and I'm just taking notes. And I always say, by the way, if it's okay with you, I want to take notes just so I don't forget anything because I forget things. And so, and people are okay with that. But when they say, oh, we did this and we did this, I'm writing it down. Even if I'm on the back of the data input sheets, it doesn't matter because I know I'm going to forget. And
it's back to the when you see one. You don't have the job yet. And you're just walking around and saying, I'm going to remember this.
Right.
They're registering that. And they're going, this guy's not.
Yeah.
He's not paying attention.
He's just telling us what we want to hear.
Exactly.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times when I go to input a listing before we go live, I can't remember what kind of roof they have.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Because I wasn't looking at the roof when I was on the appointment. And so just by being thorough and taking notes, it establishes that you're a professional and you take this seriously. You're not just winging it. Right. There are some people in the world that don't mind if you wing things, but if you have somebody that's analytical or they're more left brain than right brain, and they see somebody that's winging it, you're not getting the listing.
And to add to that, brokers, if they're your friends or friends of friends and you met them at the barbecue, this is not a reason to be casual.
Right.
This is where you show them the other side of you, your professional side.
Yeah. If anything, you want to go out of your way to say, this is how I work. This is what I do for a living. And this is how important I take it.
Yeah.
And so, because what you need to get done is important to me.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then there's obviously some other obvious questions. Are you planning on buying another home?
Yeah.
Are you staying in the area or are you moving to Montana? If they're moving to Montana, you can probably find a great broker they can work with there if they haven't already made a connection, and maybe you can pick up a referral fee.
Yeah.
Main thing is you want to help introduce them to a great broker, and I'm using Montana as an example, because you're going to need to communicate on the closing of this one if they're basing it on their ability to purchase another home.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so find out what their moving plans are, and if they have, because there are things in the seller's world that are keeping them up at night
Yeah.
that we're not thinking about.
And
Because
that's a good question to ask, by
yeah,
the way. What's keeping you up
what's
at night
keeping you
about
up at
this?
night? What are your biggest concerns? Is it the timing of the move? Is it the overall convenience and the hassle-free aspect of it, or is it getting top dollar?
Yeah.
I mean, those are usually the three big categories. What's the most important thing to you? And they're all valid.
Yeah.
But if you had to put them in order, what's the most important thing? Because I guarantee you, they're thinking about a lot of things we're not thinking about. The kids transferring schools, if they have kids. Well, we're not losing sleep over that, but they sure are. And so we need to be sensitive to that and help them through this process to help get these problems solved.
Right, right. I think these are all really good questions, and I think just taking that time to really ask get down to the nitty gritty, and you have to build yourself a bridge to that point. Though you can't just walk in
Yeah.
and say, "What's keeping you up at night?
Right.
How much do you owe on the
Exactly,
house?
right.
Are you ready to
Well,
list?"
And one of the maybe the last thing, but one of the other things that I always try to figure out is if they've sold homes before, what was that experience like?
Yeah.
What was your past experience?
What do you think they're
with a
going to
real
say,
estate
Alan?
agent, or what did that go like? And
What's the common answer to that?
the common
Just curious.
answer is a lack of communication.
Communication,
That,
right.
they came in, they listed our house, we never heard from them again. They made a small fortune in compensation, and I don't think they earned it.
Yeah.
So let's fix that. Let's communicate with our clients. The approach that I take is if my clients are always calling me, then that tells me that my level of communication with them is not sufficient for them, because everybody's different. I've had clients that they rarely call me. They just, when you get an offer, let me know.
Yeah.
The rest, don't bother me. I'm busy, right? I've had other clients that call me 2 or 3 times a day because every little thing bothers them. So if they're calling you, then you need to be calling them more frequently, regardless of whether or not you think your level of communication is suffice. It's not, because they're telling you right now they need more. Some clients need more, some clients need less. But what's your past experience been like? And then if they tell you, well, that agent never called us, never talked to us, but well, guess what? You better make sure you do.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to establish. I take it as a personal challenge to change people's opinions. If they've had a bad experience with a real estate broker in the past, I want to be the guy that's going to change your opinion.
Absolutely,
right now.
right.
And let's put that in the past, right?
Yeah.
Because I've had bad chocolate cake and I've had good chocolate cake, and I want to be the good chocolate cake. Okay, maybe there's no bad chocolate cake, but in other words, I
know
want
what you're getting at,
I
man.
want to set the standard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, those are great ones, and everyone's going to find their own way.
Notice none of this had to do with price.
No.
We haven't.
We haven't even got there yet.
In a listing presentation, you have the marketing and the personality and all this kind of thing, and then you have the pricing presentation. Those are 2 separate things, and a lot of times I think brokers make the mistake of just jumping right into price. So I got on the computer this morning. I spent 3.5 minutes, and I determined that your house was going to sell for $775.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, that's
And that is on the seller's mind
Yeah.
the whole time you're talking to them. What's the value? What's the value? What's the value?
Right.
But you have to build the bridge to get to talking about the numbers. And I always go back to that example when I was in my early 20s, and I showed up at the house unprepared.
right?
You got the listing. We'll come back and we'll talk numbers later.
Yeah.
What that's saying to me is I need to know if I can work with you first.
Right.
And then we can get down to
This is going to be a short-term marriage.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times they're just sitting there judging whether or not, can I work with this person? Do I want this person in my life for the next 30, 60, 90 days?
Right.
And so I think we lose sight of that. And, the other important thing is, just providing a solution. If you need to get to Montana by the end of next month, then here's a good strategy we should consider.
Yeah.
And they make the decisions, and we control the process. Is the best way to look at that.
Yeah.
So that's just some of the questions I think I would ask. If you can find out how much they think their home is worth, When you come in with your pricing strategy, it helps you know, okay, I've got an obstacle here. They think it's worth 100,000 more than the market is showing, based on what their neighbor told them, or it's kind of good to know that kind
And
of
a
stuff
lot of
too.
brokers are hesitant to ask
Yeah.
that question, but I think it's important. And if you get a seller that says, "Well, that's your job," just go with the flow. But you're just trying to figure out if their number is sort of
Is
based
realistic, so
in a realistic.
maybe you have to explain why maybe it's not, or
Yeah.
if it is realistic with what your numbers are coming in at, then you're not going to have to worry or spend a
Yeah.
lot of time on that.
Yeah.
So
So that's important.
yeah.
So let's go to the other side. So things that we think a seller should ask or talk about with a prospective broker before they hire them.
So one of the first things, I think, if you're a seller, you should find out what's the experience level of the person that you're talking to. How many homes have they sold in the neighborhood?
And let me preface this with one thing. It's not always that you need to have somebody that sells 50 houses a year,
Correct.
right? Sometimes a new broker who is dialed in and ready to go, and you know them when you see them, even if they're new, might do a better job for you.
Right. There's a lot of, we can think of plenty of examples of people that have come from other professions that treat this profession seriously. And even though they're relatively new, they've been in the business less than a year, they're dialed in and they're ready to go. And now it's just about meeting people. I know on the flip side of
Yes.
that, plenty of seasoned veterans that are part-time mentally.
I was just going to say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there are a lot of new brokers that might be much better
Yes.
because sometimes as brokers sort of go along, there's different phases in life, right?
Right.
And they might be in the fall or winter phase.
Yeah,
you
they
know?
might they on the back nine of life, so
back
to speak,
nine.
in
The
terms
back nine of
of
their
their
career.
mental
Yeah.
engagement into their profession.
Yeah,
right?
and they're just kind of phoning
It's
it
not
in.
even an age thing. It's just like I've been
Yeah.
doing this for 20 years. I really don't care.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's
well,
not what you want.
That's not what you want. So
Even if they're highly productive, sometimes I want somebody that really wants to advocate for me and really work hard for me. And if that's a new broker, great.
there's an old saying that somewhere in the world is the world's worst doctor. They graduated from the worst medical school and bottom of their class, and today they're seeing patients.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, so asking what their experience is, take that with a grain of salt, because it's not longevity. It's not how long you've been in the business. It's what you're trying to determine is how good are you at this.
Yeah.
And even if they're brand new in the business, if they're dialed in and ready to go, that may be what you want.
And if you're a new broker, this is where you rely on your brokerage. So this is why you join a brokerage that is going to support you.
Right.
Because you can talk about what your brokerage does in the marketplace, the experience of your brokers, your fellow brokers, your peers, and your designated broker, the resources that you have at your fingertips on your phone.
Yes.
I can call my broker anytime if I get stuck. And I have all these folks that have lots of experience. They're going to come help me dial in the price. They're going to talk to me about what we should do with your property. So there's always ways that you can work around the fact that you are just getting started in the business.
Right. You have a team that's supporting you, that's
Yeah.
helping you get through the process too. So don't let that worry you at
Yeah.
all. One of the other concerns, sellers usually have three questions. What's my house going to sell for?
Yeah.
How long is it going to take? And what are you going to do to get it sold?
Right.
So finding out what the broker thinks a reasonable pricing strategy would be is important to you as a seller, because that's going to affect your net proceeds. Don't go by what you see online. There's you can go to 12 different websites and get a prediction of what your house is going to sell for, and they all have an $80,000 to $100,000 spread on low price versus high price.
Especially if you're talking Zillow or your tax assessed value.
Yeah.
Generally not a good barometer.
Right.
It might dial you into the hemisphere.
Right.
But to really get down to the brass tacks, that's where your broker comes
So I was looking at a property yesterday that the high price. So Zillow has a Zestimate, right?
Yeah.
But then what nobody looks at is there's a low number and a high number, and then in big bold print is the Zestimate, which is kind of right in the middle, right? Sellers look at the top number,
course.
and buyers look at the bottom number.
Yeah.
And so and here's the
Funny
truth.
how that works.
I don't know about you, but I've never had anybody show up with a Zillow name tag and ask to walk around my house so they could give me an accurate Zestimate.
Right.
That's never happened.
They don't show
They're
up.
using a computer program and an algorithm and AI to determine what your price is probably going to be.
Yeah.
So it's a starting point. It's a barometer. You're never probably going to sell your property for less than assessed value right now. It's still
Right.
as bad as taxes are.
Yeah.
You know, it's still probably lower than your real market value.
There are times though in the marketplace where that number
Might be.
might be higher than what it's worth. Not right now, but about 20 years ago there was a time.
Yeah, in the dark ages. Yeah. When I rode to work on a woolly mammoth.
Yeah.
So
you know, you never know, but yeah, that definitely is something that is going to be on the forefront of the seller's mind the entire time. You know, they're just thinking, what's the number? What's the number? What's the number? But you really need to work on some of these other things.
Well, I think the other concern for folks is, ask your broker, what's your marketing strategy? What are you going to do to help get the home sold? You know, how do you market things? Are you doing old school stuff and new school stuff? Because guess what? Old school stuff like a sign in the front yard and open houses, that's been around for ages, right?
Yeah.
Because they work.
Right.
Because they work. You may find your best buyer driving through the neighborhood, and then they see a sign. They didn't even know your house was for sale because they're not looking online, right? But they see that sign and think, "Wow, that's a cool house. Let's go check this out," right? So maybe the sign attracts them. Maybe the open houses attract them. But then you have to have all the new technology too. You have to shotgun this listing out to all of the websites that any potential buyer is looking at, and you can't leave any stone unturned. Now, we're fortunate with our company. We have world-class marketing.
And we work hard on our marketing plan.
We work hard on it, but at the same time, the owner of our company from the top down is only concerned with world-class presentation and how can we effectively market people's homes. And so I've never, that's the reason why I've been with this company for 27 years, because I've never felt the need to go anywhere else.
Right.
But not everybody is that fortunate. And so if you look at your marketing materials, if you're a broker and you're suspect of those, then fix it. You know, get better stuff. And as a seller, when you're looking at the marketing system that the broker's talking about, pay attention to the quality of the materials that they're showing you too, because that's how this person is marketing themselves.
Right.
And they're never going to market your home better than they're marketing themselves to get this listing. And so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. But if all the presentation materials are dog-eared and tired and crinkled and, you know, it looks like the dog slept on them last night, that's how they're probably going to market your home. So be very aware of the marketing strategy that the broker is going to use. If they're just going to throw it on the multiple, well, guess what? Anybody could do that.
Well, and I think the telltale is if you're a seller and you're interviewing a broker and they don't have a written marketing plan that they can articulate to you, and they're just kind of off the top telling you, oh, I'll do this and that. That's not a marketing plan. Right. So if they don't have a written marketing plan that they can commit to, then they're out.
So, and that's a really valid point, because a marketing plan, you may never need it. You may just get lucky and the clouds will part and here comes a buyer on the first day and you haven't even launched your boost campaign, right? Well, you can't plan on that though. So you have to have a program in place that you're going to do every single time regardless, because it works.
Yeah.
And then if you don't need it, great. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Absolutely.
And so as a seller, be very focused in on what their marketing plan is, how they're going to accomplish, how are we grabbing buyers' eyes? Because everybody looks on their keyboard. They start with the keyboard, right? How are we going to do this? What does it look like, our online presence?
Yeah, if that broker doesn't have a written plan and can't articulate it well, then time to move on to the next one.
And another thing that's important too is, as a seller, who am I working with?
Yeah.
Are you going to handle everything from A to Z yourself, or are you going to pawn me off on a team
Yeah.
and a transaction
Don't get me
coordinator
started about
that isn't
teams.
licensed, and who do I
Yeah.
need to talk to, right? As a On a side note, as a real estate broker, it's so frustrating when you're dealing with a team because nobody knows what they're doing, and so they have 7 people trying to do something, and they want everybody in the communication link. No, give me one person
Yeah.
that I can talk to
Yeah.
every single time and handle this for me. So as a seller, find out if somebody comes in, they're bragging about their team. Guess what? They're probably going to take your listing and then pawn you off to Sally down the hall, who you've never met.
I was going to say, well, this is probably unpopular with other brokers, but we're not big fans of teams or random transaction coordinators that nobody knows getting involved in the transaction. Not a fan at all. So if a broker comes in and starts talking about his team, that just means you're going to see him today. And then after that, everybody else is going to be talking to you that you've never engaged with before.
Yeah. Now we all have team members. We have lenders. We have title
Yeah,
and
that's
escrow
different.
people and home inspectors that we trust, and all those people I consider
Yeah.
part of my team. But I don't have a team around me that I'm going to hand your listing off to so they can handle the details while I go out and be a rainmaker.
Yeah.
That's and quite frankly, nobody gets into real estate. If I took 1,000 real estate brokers, lined them up in a row, why'd you get in real estate? I bet you 1,000 people would never say, because I want to be part of a team.
Yeah.
None of them say that,
Yeah.
but they get funneled into teams because the brokerage needs them to do something. And it's an easy way to manage a big office. Well, we don't believe in that process. That's on a side note. But watch out for that because that may or may not help you.
Now, the next thing that I think you should probably ask the broker and look for an answer is, what do I need to do to my home to get it ready for the market? And generally, the answer should not be nothing,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, if you're afraid as a broker to talk about how to make the property more marketable, it's something you need to work on.
Right.
And I in the past have been one of those people that have always tried to be a little neutral. And over time, I've learned that sellers are really looking for us to be honest with them.
Yeah. So if I find usually if a client asks me, gosh, do you think we should paint that wall? That's usually an indication that they think they should. They just want confirmation. Now, I'm a big believer that you should never spend a dime to get a nickel back.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll have clients that want to fix something because they're bored with it, or they've been watching too much HGTV and they have the real estate shows that tell them, oh, paint the inside of your closet, we'll get an extra 10 grand, right? That's not reality. That's a reality TV show. But usually when they say, gosh, do you think, we should do something about this? I always like to ask clients, do you have any projects you want to finish or get completed before you put it on the market? But if they're saying, should we do this? Should we do this? Then usually the answer is yes. But unless you think it's just because out of boredom, they want to change it from a gray wall to a beige wall, that's not going to really make much of an impact. But certain things are always true, like having a dialed in entryway, having, curb appeal, having all these things dialed in will help set it out from the market. But just be honest with people.
Right.
Sometimes you need to tell your clients, if you could every now and then empty the litter box, this would be good. You just have to be honest with people, not insult them.
Yeah.
But they're paying us for our honesty and our professional opinion. I don't go into my dentist and say, what do you think? Filling or a crown? He doesn't ask me that.
Yeah.
So we have to be honest with people.
Absolutely. Okay. A few other things I think that are important to talk about if you're a seller interviewing a broker is what's going on in the marketplace.
Yep.
Right? How long is it going to take to sell on average?
Right.
What are the stats? And if they should know. If they don't know, then be a little bit leery, right?
They're never going to be more prepared for your listing than they are on the listing appointment.
Right.
And so if they don't have answers on the listing appointment, well, then that's kind of setting the tone. This journey is going to be a sketchy roadmap.
Yeah.
So
And then, the buildup always is talking about the fee, and that's a conversation that you should have after you've kind of covered all these other things, and you know at that point whether or not you want to work with this broker or not. So then you're talking turkey, right?
Right.
How's this going to work out fee wise?
What's the compensation look like?
Yeah.
And, you know, now there's a lot of, this is a topic for another
Yeah.
discussion, but,
Yeah.
you know, what are we offering compensation to buyer brokers? Are we going to do that? And those are all good conversations to have. But when you're having these conversations with the person sitting at your kitchen table, how confidently are they handling this?
Right.
You know, because you don't want somebody that's just going to overprice your home to get a listing or cut their fee to get a listing because they think that's what it takes to get you to say yes. That's not going to serve you in the long run, because if you're talking to a broker who's willing to cut their fee, well, what are they going to do when you get a low offer on your house? Are they going to support you in your position and negotiate that? Or they're just going to say, well, we should take this just to get it done. Right.
Yeah, and there's some examples of that out in the marketplace that will list for 1%.
Well, there are companies out there. We'll put it
Yeah.
on the MLS for you. We'll charge a flat fee, and you negotiate everything with everybody coming in.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah,
You know, you might as well stick a sign in your yard and say, you know, I'm selling it by myself, and try that route rather than paying somebody a fee to put it on a multiple. So anyway, use common sense. And if you want to work with this person, everybody deserves to get paid. Talk about compensation, find out what your options are, and choose the best path for yourself, you know?
Absolutely.
And ultimately, what I like to do is I like to tell people, okay, we're moving on to the next chapter of the life, right? Let's make this one a nice chapter. Let's finish this chapter.
close it out
Let's close it out in a
nice.
positive way. It's like
Yeah.
a great meal at a fancy steakhouse.
Right.
You got the best appetizers. You got the best service. You had the best entree. The steak was amazing, and the dessert sucks. Well, guess what? Every time you drive by that restaurant, you're going to think how bad the dessert sucks.
How great the steak
You're
was.
not going to remember how good the
Right.
steak was.
Yeah.
We all do that. It's the punctuation at the end of the sentence.
Yeah.
And so just, you know, focus on that. Can I work with this person? And what's it going to look like? And, you know, let's go do this. I try to make sure that everybody has it's a roller coaster. It
Yeah.
can be a roller coaster emotionally, but my job is to keep it pinched down so that it's a fun ride, not a terrifying ride.
Right.
And so I don't bring drama to the equation, right? The drama's kept inside me.
Yeah.
And then every now
That
and then
explains a
Derek
lot.
and I dump on each other because we got too much drama in our buckets. But that's okay. That's a
Yeah.
safe drama dump. But just, you know, just keep the ride enjoyable for your clients. Make them want to do business with you again. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Yeah.
So if you're a seller or you're a broker getting ready for a listing presentation, think about these things. These are things that you just want to know during your casual conversation that'll help you do a better job, and as a seller will help you do a better job of choosing who you want to work with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.